Welcome to day 403, everybody. 403. We're going to talk about life's one-liners. You know, sometimes life doesn't happen the way you want it to happen, and we have to know how to deal with that. All right? Life's one-liners. Today's video is an 11-minute belly buster laughing video from Rodney Dangerfield on the Johnny Carson show. For those of us old enough to remember Rodney Dangerfield and old enough to remember Johnny Carson, before Jay Leno, before whoever the Conan O'Brien, and then back to Jay Leno, and then whoever it is now. So, you know, we're spending this month talking about, you know, when the world opens up, we need to open up smart. But the world will never, it doesn't happen the way we plan it to happen. You know, there's that old saying, like, you plan your life and the rest of the world laughs. You know, life laughs as you're making plans, you know, because it never happens the way you think it should happen. So Rodney Dangerfield died in 2004, but he was really big back in the 60s and 70s. It was probably the peak of his career. A lot of people know him from the movie Caddyshack. It's a hilarious movie, but you know, he became one of the most popular stand-up comedians. He was on late night television all the time. But I want to share a little bit of his background story, at least according to Wikipedia. So he was born Jacob Rodney Cohen, so to a Jewish family. And his father left his family when he was a young boy. And his mom was like just trying to do her best to raise all the kids. And she was very cold, very distant, never hugged and kissed. Rodney Dangerfield, back in 2001 or something like that, maybe it was even 2004, right before he died, told Howard Stern on live radio that he was molested as a little boy. That some man in the town, he grew up in Long Island, like gave him a nickel if he could just kiss on him for 5 minutes. And that happened several times. So it's so funny, you know, our stories of abuse, they're so common. So he starts writing jokes and working at the age of 15 to help support his family. And when he was 19 years old, he changes his name to Jack Roy. He officially changes his name to Jack Roy, dropping the Cohen last name. And he starts working gigs, trying to, you know, write comedy for other comics and performing. But he never makes it big. And he eventually has to go back to work to support his family. And he said, making a joke about how bad his career was, he said, "I quit showbiz, and the only person who realized I had quit was me." Because no one knew who he was. So he goes to like becoming a singing waiter. He sells aluminum siding. So he's a door-to-door salesman. Doesn't this sound familiar? The reason why I'm sharing this is because, you know, this happens to a lot of us. We have these dreams and visions. So he decides to go all in. He decides, he's thinking about, you know, like he has to become a comic, and he's working on his act again, and he says he needs to develop a character that people can relate to. And so he develops the character. His stage name is Rodney Dangerfield. He develops this act where he's self-deprecating. You know, his famous line is, "I get no respect. No respect. No respect." And he's always talking about, you know, how hard he had it as a little kid, you know. In today's video, he says, "And my father was no help either. I told my dad I wanted to go ice skating, and he told me to wait until it got a little bit warmer." Get it? So the ice would melt. "I get no respect. My wife is so cold." How cold? "She's so cold, you know, her side of the waterbed is frozen." Her side of the waterbed is frozen. I think he was the one who said, you know, when I was a little kid, I was so ugly. in order to get the dogs to play with me, they'd tie a pork chop around my neck. I get no respect. So he develops this character of Rodney Dangerfield, this hardworking, average Joe who gets no respect. And that's his entire shtick. And that's when his life takes off. So turns out in like 1960, so he recommits to comedy, and he's not getting anywhere. He's working all these clubs. He actually ended up marrying the same woman twice. He gets married, divorced. 2 years later, remarries, divorced again. But he says during that time period, it was hard on his marriage, and he got himself into debt, $20,000 in debt, which was a lot back in the 60s, right? And he is struggling really hard. He barely make it. His marriage ends. And then Ed Sullivan, the Ed Sullivan Show, this is lesson number 1, needed a last-minute replacement. And someone mentioned Rodney Dangerfield. And he said yes. And he came on Ed Sullivan's show as a last-minute replacement, and he was the highlight of the evening. And after that, his career took off. He started performing in regular acts on late-night television, you know, those comedy routines. He opened a comedy club. He started headlining in Vegas. Dangerfields, his comedy club in New York, still open, just closed recently for the pandemic. So lesson number 1, when opportunity presents itself, this is important, say yes. That's important. Comment if you've had an opportunity in your life, and for whatever reason, you said no. You were too embarrassed, you were insecure, the timing wasn't right, you didn't know, like, you didn't take the job because you didn't want to move. You got into the college of your dreams, but it was on, across the country, other side of the country, and you didn't want to leave your family. There was an opportunity, and you said no, right? That happens. You have to be smart enough that when an opportunity opens up, you have to say yes. I had a little mentee, unofficial mentee. She just wanted my opinion on something, but she was working in the court system as a legal aid for years in her little town in New Mexico, and she said, "Doc, I got to get out of this little town." I mean, it's a little tiny town of 5,000 people. I said, "You got to get out of that little town." She was in her 20s, mid-20s. So she applied for different positions. She said, "Doc, I have 2 opportunities. One is in Golden, Colorado, to an attorney, and the other one is New York City, to a high-powered firm. I would be a legal aid to this powerful attorney. Which one do you think I should take?" Which one do you think I told her? It's that bank robber who, when he was caught, they asked, I can't remember, Dillinger? Was it John Dillinger? They asked him, "Why do you rob banks?" And his answer was, "Because that's where they keep the money." Duh. That's where they keep the money. In other words, what he was saying is you got to go to where it is what you want. Like, if you want to act, you got to go to LA. I mean, you're not going to become a serious actor staying in Dallas or Austin or your little community, play. It's a start, but at some point you got to make the leap of faith. If you want to become a financial advisor, you're going to have to spend some time on Wall Street. You got to know where to go to where the biggest minds are. So of course I told her, I was like, "You need to go to New York City. You're from this little town, go to New York City, this big ball." She goes, "Yeah, I know it's an amazing opportunity, but I felt so much better about this other." So guess which one she ends up choosing? She ends up choosing the opportunity in Colorado. And nothing wrong with Colorado, but it wasn't even Denver. It was Golden, which is a little bit outside of Denver. And it's fine. and I think she's there, but I wouldn't know. I don't talk to her anymore. But and that was a big, now some of y'all were like, hold on, Dr. V, don't cut her some break, you know. That was probably a big deal for her to move from this little town to Colorado away from her family and blah, blah, blah. Good for her, take a good leap. Don't fucking ask my opinion. That's fine if you feel that way. But that's why you have mentors, or at least someone you're gonna bother, you know. If you're gonna bother, if you respect them enough to bother them, at least strongly consider that opinion. And, you know, we spent a long time talking about it. I said, I'm sure you're going to do fine either place. You're going to do fine either place. But just remember, bank is where they keep the monies. I said, she said, what if I fail? I don't know anybody, yada, yada, yada. You know, Colorado, I can drive back home to see my family. I said, I know, I get it. Yeah, and I was like, which one pays more? They said, New York City. I said, why? She said, cost of living. I said, yep. So either way, it doesn't matter. So you're going to fly back or drive back. Either way, it's going to cost you money to see your family. I said, but if you really struggle in New York City for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you do a good job at this big firm in New York City, guess what happens? What happens? Your life completely changes. And in New York City, not like in Manhattan, not like some little town in New York. It was New York City. She was gonna go to the big leagues. And so even if you hate it, even if you don't like the city, you might love it. You might end up loving it. I love New York City. I wouldn't live there, but I love it. If I was young and single, I'd move there if that opportunity happened. So when the opportunity knocks, say yes. You know, say yes. What happens in life is a lot of times we shy away from the opportunity. And you take Rodney Dangerfield. When his opportunity happened, boy, he went all in. He went all in. That's what you need to do. Tip number 2. You got to go all in. I promise you. You got to go all in. No, I'm just going to tiptoe. I'm just going to put my toe in. I want to try it out. See, here's the problem. You know that story? If you drop a frog in boiling water, it jumps out right away because it knows it's hot. Versus you put a frog in cold water because it's an amphibian, and then you turn up the heat slowly, it will stay in there and just boil to death because it doesn't know any better. Turns out they tested that and that's not true, but you get the story. So sometimes you put yourself in this situation, you say, I'm just going to try it out. And you're like that frog in cold water. It doesn't hurt you. It heats up a little bit, but it's a bad situation. And then one day you wake up and you friggin' realize that you've been miserable for 5 years or 10 years. Comment if you know what I'm talking about. That you really hate your job, you're good at it, but you don't really like it. You realize you missed your opportunity to move to Hollywood, to start a singing career, to do what it is you really want to do. Comment if you know what I'm talking about. 5 years later, you realize this is not the person I want to be married to, you know? For me, it was 3 years of like waiting, W-A-D-I-N-G, waiting, just trying to keep my nose barely above water because I was too proud. I didn't have any help. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't know to declare bankruptcy sooner. If I had done that, I would have saved my life 3 years. I'd be faster. I would have been retired at age 42. So if you go all in, you're going to find out really, you'll be that frog in boiling water. You'll jump out right away. Like you'll know one way or another. Jim Rohn says, good. You're going to do something. You're going to know. You're going to know right away. Right? Tip number 3, life never happens the way you want it to happen. It never does. So if you go the safe, easy route, life won't happen the way you think it happens. Does that make sense? The job, oh, it's my dream job. I'm so excited to my first day at this work. Fucking 5 years later, like you'll be miserable. You'll be moved on. You know, in fact, if you ever have any professional coaching, comment if you have a professional coach and they tell you, dude, you need to move to a new career like every 2 to 3 years. They want you finding a new position every 2 or 3 years. Otherwise, you get stagnant. Your skills will deteriorate. It will show that you weren't motivated. It's not a good. See, the average person, and you're not average, thinks that it's a good thing to give the company 10 years or 12 years in your position. But people who are making hiring decisions, admins, executives, will sit there and go, why did you stay at that position 10 years? Like, why didn't you move up? Why didn't you get promoted? Does that make sense what I'm telling you? But the average person goes, no, I'm a loyal worker. Well, they're going to hire you for those low-paying positions. They want people like you to stay in those low-paying positions because you're loyal. You'll show up. That's fine, but you'll never move up. You'll never advance your career. They'll never hire you as an executive. They'll never hire you as the project manager or the manager. They'll never give you that manager position. Comment if you know the scenario. They hire, like, there's a management position that opens up, and they don't give it to the person who's been there 10 years. They give it instead to the whippersnapper who's only been there 1 year. Why is that? You have to think about that. Why is that? It's exactly for the reason why I'm telling you. They don't want that person who's been there 10 years to leave. They'll give her a little bit of raise, but she's good in that position. But she doesn't have the fire that the person with 1 year who comes in, a lot of ideas, goes all into that business, and they give that person the promotion. So life doesn't happen the way that you want it to happen. So if you tiptoe into life, it won't happen the way you think it's going to happen. If you go all in, even if you study it, analyze it, etc., it still won't happen the way you think it's going to happen. The only difference is what? You're going to figure it out faster. Tip number 4. If you go all in, you will figure it out faster. If you pour everything into your marriage, you will figure it out faster. Dude, I married the wrong person. Or we got to get on the same page faster. This is not good. If you start giving ideas to the new position and volunteering and hanging out with executives, you're going to figure it out faster. Like, man, I like these bosses. They're good people. Like, I want them to mentor me. I'm going to try to go for the next promotion. Or you're going to figure out faster, these are a bunch of crooks. They don't have business ethics that are in alignment with mine. They're all about the bottom dollar. In which case, you stay there for 2 years, polish up your resume, get good. Don't start trouble, but then start looking for a new position. Whether it's a fellowship or additional training or going back to college or a new firm or a new career altogether. Tip number 5. We all start with 0. You never know where you're going to be in the future. See, if we knew we would succeed, we'd say, oh yeah, we would do it. But you don't know. You understand what I'm saying? You don't know. We never know where we'll be 5 years from now. We never know if you're going to be a huge star or not. You'll never know if you'll be still married to the same person. You think you are. But aren't there marriages that end after a month? Aren't there marriages that end after a year? Yes. Aren't there marriages that last 50 years? Of course. Of course. But there are also marriages that end after 1 year. You just never know. But if you want your life to change, you got to figure it out a lot faster. That is the key. Next tip, last tip. Why Rodney Dangerfield? he took his years of struggle, and he learned from it. He became wise. It's wisdom. You take all those hard times. Les Brown says you take all those hard times. The successful times you put in your head. Les Brown says the successful times you put in your head, like you learn it. Like, I did this good. Like, this was a good move. You learn it. The successful times you put in your head. The hard times you put in your heart. The down times, the low times you put in your heart. By that you mean you learn the lesson down here. So Rodney Dangerfield says, you know, my marriage broke up. I was $20,000 in debt. I was down on myself, but I kept going. I put the hard times in my heart. And he became an icon. When the opportunity opened, he said yes. And his career went from 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000. I mean, he never struggled again. He dies in 2004, October 5th. In August, he had to have a heart valve replacement. And they asked him, Rodney, how long do you expect to be in the hospital? And in classic Rodney Dangerfield humor, he goes, well, if it all goes really well, I'll be in here about a week. And if it doesn't, about an hour and a half. Well, it didn't go very well. And he was in a coma for a month. He was in the hospital in a coma for a month before he died. He never woke up again. He never said goodbye to his loved ones, his kids, his second wife, his fans. See, he didn't get a deathbed moment. He went in for heart valve surgery and died a month later in a coma. For the hard times, you put it in your heart. The successful times, you put it in your head. So 2008, 9, 10, 11, August 2011 was when I moved to that little town in Robinson, because I had filed bankruptcy. Those were my hard times. I put a lot in my heart. And honestly, you know, and then I moved to Albuquerque 2013, and I was director bariatrics there from 2013 to 2018, 5 years. And I put all that successful thing in my head. I put all those successes in my head. And then when they closed down the program, I took all that wisdom in my head and remembered how I felt in my heart, and I walked away. I walked away from my $425,000 base salary. I walked away from my 13 years of schooling and training. 13 years of schooling and training. I walked away from my titles. I walked away from, like, I was moving up in the bariatric societies where they were asking me to be on committees and things like that and become treasurer and blah, blah, blah. I walked away from all that. And then 2020 hit. And I had the best year of my life. Because I combined my heart and my head. And don't think for a second that I'm sitting on my laurels. Like, I am learning from the successes of 2020. And I am preparing for 2021 as we open back up. What's the next step? What am I going to do next? Because life, either way, life never happens the way that you want it to happen, right? We're going all out. I mean, after this house, we're moving to Costa Rica. In May, we're going to go visit it, see if Erica likes it. And if she loves it, we're moving to Costa Rica in 18 months. So we're not pussyfooting around. We're not moving down the street. We're not moving to another town. We're moving to another country. We have this opportunity while Mason's young. And we're going to go all in and figure it out. That's what I mean about life. That's what I mean about opportunity. Go all in, right? Does that make sense? I love you guys very much. Hope you have an amazing day. Day 403. See you tomorrow. Bye, guys.